Hi, and welcome to our Getting Started with Windows 10 class. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of Microsoft's newest operating system, Windows 10. An operating system is the software that manages all the hardware and software on your computer. There's only a handful of other major operating systems available for people, including the Apple OS, iOS for Apple devices, Android for things like Galaxy smartphones, Chrome OS for things like Chromebooks, and Linux, which is a type of operating system typically used by developers or other serious computer users. So for most people, you're going to find Windows 10 is going to be the operating system on your computer, especially if you have something that you bought from Dell or HP or other major sellers like that. An operating system controls everything that your computer does, all of the memory that's stored on it, all of the files, and how it interacts with all the pieces of hardware that are involved in the computer. So we're going to dig into that a little bit, but mostly we're going to focus on what you see in front of you and how to work with that. Before we begin, I do want to show you where to get the information for this handout. This is what we're going to be working off of for today's class. Starting at the Bloomingdale Library's homepage, that's mybpl.org, we can go to Services, Computers, then Computer Classes, and we'll see all the classes and materials that we have for our online courses right now, and right there at the bottom is Windows 10. So if I click on that, it will pull up the handout that we're going to be working with today. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the basics of Windows 10. So for those of you who have used Windows computers before but are new to Windows 10, let's take a moment to talk about what's different now that we're in the newest version. The jump from Windows 7 to Windows 8 was intended to create an operating system that looked and worked the same across different PCs, tablets, phones, etc. This happened when tablets were first becoming very popular and Microsoft was trying to get in on that trend. Unfortunately, Windows 8 was pretty unpopular. It lost a lot of the comfortable features that people knew from earlier versions of Windows and didn't update them very smoothly. So Windows quickly put out Windows 8.1, which was a bit of a shift backwards, and then they went with Windows 10 a little earlier than expected, which shifted closer to the Windows 7 and Windows XP looks that we were all familiar with, but is intended to work smoother with cloud processing and other online things. For the most part, a lot of the basic functions that we're familiar with are going to still be here. We're going to see things like the Start menu that we're going to take a look at all together in just a moment, the System Tray, the Taskbar, lots of things that were in older versions of Windows, but there have been some changes, and we're going to go through all of those. First off, I'm going to mention that some standard and popular applications have been removed. Things like Solitaire, Calculator, Minesweeper, things that we were familiar with, small little programs that people used a lot, have been taken out of Windows and are now available through the Windows App Store, the Microsoft Store. This is very similar for those of you who have worked with either the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS App Store, or Apple Store as you might know it, but it's a Windows version of it. And by default you would have the link to it right here in your taskbar at the bottom. I've actually removed it from my computer because it's not something that I use very often, but you can still go to the Windows Store anytime you are inclined. A lot of services are available there for free, but there are some that you would have to pay for if you wanted to add them onto your computer. Another big change that we have from before is they've updated Internet Explorer and created a new browser called Microsoft Edge. Even the icon looks very similar to Internet Explorer. You're not going to see a lot of major changes, but they have adjusted this to be a little bit more similar to Google Chrome and Firefox in appearance, if not in the background and the function. All the things that we're familiar with from other browsers would still work the same here. You can search in the address bar instead of having to type in an address. You can add links, a lot of things that you would work with. It's very similar to Internet Explorer. It's just an updated version of it that they've changed the branding and the name a bit. If you prefer to use Firefox or Chrome, you can still download those on Windows 10 and they work just fine. I do mention to people every now and then in my internet classes that some smaller websites or things that have very specific needs work better with Internet Explorer or Internet Edge functionality. So if you're ever trying to fill out a form somewhere or register with something and for whatever reason it doesn't work, give it a try and bounce over to one of these browsers, either Edge or if you'd like, you can still download Internet Explorer 11 for Windows 10 and it will work there as well. Next thing that I want to talk about here is the Start menu. This has been one of the key features of every version of Windows for a long time now. and that is still very much the same with Windows 10. When I click on the Start menu here in the bottom left-hand corner, it pulls up something that is similar to what you might have seen in Windows XP or Windows 7, very different from the Windows 8 look where it changed the entire screen to be covered with possible panels. The way they have organized it here in Windows 10 is on the left-hand side we have some key buttons. I'm going to hover over these so you can see them. You see the user profile right there. That would have information about your login. We'll talk about those in just a few moments. Profile image if you want to change that, update your PIN, and so forth. And this would also go to your special libraries for your documents, your pictures, things that are only for you on this. Now we have a link directly to the Documents library because that's something that people use frequently. Underneath that we have a link to the Pictures library, another popular one. The settings will bring up the control panel and other settings that we can change. And power is where you would log off or restart or turn off your computer. In the middle, we have all of the programs currently installed on your computer. Now this is a long list. It'll be different from one computer to another. There are some things that are there on everyone's machine, things like system programs, Windows accessories, etc. And when you see this folder appearance, that means if I click on it, I will see more choices underneath. As opposed to where you see it, when you see a specific icon, when you click on that, that would open up that exact program. The programs, again, on my computer will not be the same as yours necessarily because they would depend on what you've purchased. And then on the right-hand side here, we see shortcuts to what are referred to as pinned programs or applications, things that we want to use frequently. By default, you will have some things like the Microsoft Store, perhaps Microsoft Edge, other things that they suggest that you use right away here. If you want to remove anything from the pinned programs, you can right-click on it, and you can choose Unpin from Start. If you have anything you would like to add to the pinned programs, I can right-click on it and choose Pin to Start. And when I do that, suddenly, new program there. So these are things that you would use frequently, stuff that you like to use on your own. So again, this will be different from one person to another, but if you're tired of searching through this long list every time you want to find Excel, you could right-click on it and choose to pin it to your Start menu. I'm going to open up these settings just so we can take a quick look at that, because that is something that has changed as well here in Windows 10. Now, for those of you with experience with Windows, you know that the control panel is something that they've had for a long time, and it's something that they tweak and change every different version of Windows that comes out. Windows 10 is no different, and they've given us a basic settings screen that allows us to type in what we want to change here and bring up some possible choices for how we might fix that. So I typed in display, and they say change the size, and that brings me some options here. You can always go back home and try again. They also have categories that you could see with this, so I could go to Network and Internet, and I could change what I'm connected to. System will give me information about my computer. Accounts will give you information about the logins available on this computer. Personalization changes the appearance. Things like lock screen. Apps are things that are installed on the computer. Privacy concerns security and personal privacy settings with this. Update is where you go to make updates to the computer. And search is if you want to try to find what you're looking for, but we have that right here. For those of you that prefer a control panel setting like you're familiar with, I'll show you how to get to that in just a minute. Now that we've talked about the Start menu, I want to talk about the taskbar across the bottom here. The most important part of the taskbar on the bottom is the Start menu. We've already covered that. But right next to it is a very useful tool called the Cortana search. Cortana is Microsoft's answer to Siri or OK Google, if you're familiar with those voice-activated tools that you'd have with iPhones or Android phones. With Cortana, you can set it up to be voice-activated if you have a microphone for your computer, but you can also simply type in what you're looking for here. So if I wanted the control panel that I'm familiar with, I would type control panel, and there we go. And now I see something reminiscent of Windows 7 and earlier versions. This also searches not just on the computer, but it searches on the internet as well. So if I were to search calculator, it wants to go to the App Store to find a calculator for me in the Microsoft Store. If I were to search for Bloomingdale Public Library, It finds documents that have that name in it because it's searching through this computer. Or I could search the web, and it pulls up Bloomingdale Public Library. So there's a quick resource to find things, whatever there might be on your computer, whether it's an app that you want to use, a document that's stored there, or something on the internet. As we move across, I see Talk to Cortana. That's what turns on the voice activation. For some computers, this will be on by default. I've turned it off on mine so that it doesn't just grab random bits of conversation and pull up searches on my screen. I find that to be a little bit annoying, but you can have that on by default if you like. Next to that is the Task View. And this is a nice tool that shows you everything that's going on in your computer very quickly and allows you to simply click on whichever one you want to grab and move to the front. Next to that, we have little shortcut icons. The ones that are currently active, you can see a blue bar underneath. You see that means that Microsoft Edge is going right here. If I were to close this, you would no longer see that blue bar, but I could just click on this to bring Microsoft Edge back up, and that's a single left click and it opens it up again. This is kind of like an extreme version of things in the Start menu, things that you want to have here all the time. And when you have apps on your desktop, you can right click on those shortcuts and choose to pin them to taskbar. So that way when you close it, it's still there. If I close the settings option, you see that one disappears because that is not pinned to my taskbar. Same with the control panel. That one I did pin to the taskbar, my mistake, so it's still there. So you see apps that you frequently use are pinned to here, and so if I click on them, they open right up, and I can make them full screen. The more things you open, the more icons you'll see across here. People have asked me in Windows classes before, how many things can I have open at once? There's no good answer to that question, because you can have as many things open as you are willing to deal with the slowdown that comes from it. The more things you have going, the more of your memory for the computer is being used, and the slower your computer will run. So I can have lots and lots of apps open, and it will eventually get to the point where my computer might crash or slow down to the point of not being useful, but there's no hard and firm number of how many things you can have going. Another question I'm often asked is, should I just leave things open like this, or can I close them? Well, many of us, myself included, are in the bad habit of leaving things open for a long period of time. That's not going to do any specific harm to your computer, but it will cause it to slow down, and eventually you will need to close things down for it to start running again. Applications or programs that you leave open like this do what's called a memory leak, where they slowly use more and more of the memory of the computer up, and until you close them, it'll start sapping more and more of the computer's resources to the point that it goes slower and slower. This is particularly bad with web browsers. They tend to, if you leave them on overnight or over a couple of days, take more and more of the computer's memory to the point that it stops working very well at all. So then you just have to close them down, sometimes restart the computer, and they'll work fine again. But that's the taskbar. As we continue to go to the right, we see the notification area or system tray. This tells you about things that are going on in the background at all times. And we see a quick list of them that we almost always have, and that is the clock and calendar. It's available in the right-hand corner there. We'll have the sound. My speakers are currently set to 100%, but if you want to mute your speakers or turn them down, you could do that. Right now, I have a microphone plugged in, so you can see that listed right there. You see a network connection listed. If this is a laptop or other wireless device, you would see the concentric quarter circles that appear there that we're familiar with from our cell phones, letting you know that you have a Wi-Fi connection going. I am on a plugged-in computer, so I have the appearance of a hard wire going to the computer there. This is telling me that I have updates available, and if I click on the little pull-down arrow, this shows me other things that are running on in the background of my computer. Typical ones for these can be things like internet security, other programs that run in the background. I have Microsoft Teams for working with other staff here at the department. This is a program that is recording what I'm currently saying. And I have other security and remote access related tools available there. You see notifications listed here. That's going to tell me status updates about my computer. And then finally, if you go all the way to the right-hand corner, if I click on that, that brings up the desktop of the computer so I can quickly get back to seeing everything on my screen. So that's a quick intro to all of the things that we see on the screen in a normal Windows 10 environment. All of these shortcuts are ways to access things that are stored or have a quick shortcut to locally on the computer, similar to older versions of Windows. Now I'd like to talk for a moment about the File Explorer. The File Explorer is a very important tool in Windows 10 that you can use by typing in Explorer in the search right here. And you see it opens up there. Or if you have the icon pinned to your taskbar, which most computers will, you can simply click on it. I already have it open here, I've moved my window down a little bit because for security reasons I don't want to have all of the networked drives that I have available here working at the library listed, but I do want to show you all of the things that you would see on a normal computer. So you see right at the top, Quick Access. This gets you to folders and file locations that you use frequently. So you can see places that I've been to recently. These are other classes that I've made or purchases that I've made or places where I store work documents here at the library. And then you'd see underneath that this PC, which has a listing for all of the places that you might want to go. So these will change frequently depending on what you use on your computer. If you're going back and forth to a certain folder a lot, that will suddenly appear here. If you change what you do, then that new one will move up the list. But these will always be available. And you can always go to this PC to get an overview of your computer and see all of the drives that are available. Everybody using a Windows computer will have a C drive. It might call it the local disk or the local drive or the hard drive, but it will always have a C disk available. This is the physical hard drive that's stored inside your computer and keeps most of the files that you use or work with on a daily basis. These are the files that make up your operating system, Windows 10 itself. These are the files that make up all the programs that we use. These are the files that we use day in and day out over and over again without thinking too much about it. And this is also where these other libraries we're going to talk about are stored. They are inside the C drive. So this is the documents and the downloads and the music and the pictures and the videos. Now, of course, it's possible to store these things outside of your computer. For that, you would need a USB drive or a CD or DVD or Blu-ray that you can burn things to, or maybe an external drive that is backing up your work on a nightly basis or a weekly basis. You would see all of those as well when you go to this PC. You would see any other drives connected listed. Most computers will have an optical drive in them. If you have a laptop, it might not. Modern laptops tend to be thinner and lighter, and so they've taken the CD, DVD, Blu-ray drives out of them. But if you have a USB drive and you plug it in, you'll suddenly see a letter for that one as well appear in this PC. But you can always count on the local disk being available. And if I click on that, you can see all of the folders inside of this computer. Now, this is not a place that we go very often. We know that it's there. Those that are a little bit more comfortable with computers will use it a lot. But really where we go most often are in places like the documents or the downloads, because that's where things that we actually work with on a day-to-day basis are stored. So if I were to click on the documents, I would see documents that are stored locally here on the computer for my user profile. We're going to talk about users in just a moment. If I wanted to work with any of these files, I could double-click on it, or click and press enter, and then the image would open up for viewing, or the document would open up for editing, or the movie would begin to play. Whatever it's supposed to do, it would start to do. When I'm done with it, I click that X in the upper right-hand corner, and it goes away. If I wanted to keep it open for later, I could click the flat bar and minimize it, and you see it zoomed down there at the bottom. When I click it back open, it appears again. If I click the square in the middle, it becomes full screen so I can see as much as possible. If I wanted to make changes to this file, I could right-click on it and see some options that are available to me there. This is called a menu that opens up, and you can select whatever item from the menu you want by left-clicking on the appropriate choice. There aren't a lot that we would frequently use here. Copy is a useful one if you wanted to copy something and reproduce it somewhere else. If you wanted to rename this because you wanted to give it a more meaningful name, you could do that, and you can change the name associated with it. You can also delete things here, but there is an easier way to delete files than that. Finally, you can go to Properties, and you can see information about the file, what kind of file it is. This is a JPEG, which is a type of image file. When it was created, so that was June 10th. When it was most recently accessed, that's today, just a few minutes ago. And how big it is. Now, I don't need any of that information, so I could either cancel or click OK, and it goes away. Finally, if I wanted to delete it, I click on it, and I press the Delete key, and away it goes. Now imagine I deleted something else, and I decided, oops, I want that back. I could get back to that by going to the recycle bin, and we'll do that in just a moment. But before we do, I want to show you if you wanted to go to another location, we can still use this directory on the left-hand side. So I could use any of these main locations, or I could go to one of my quick start ones by left-clicking there, and I would see that folder for online garage sales, a class that I recently created. Now, when you go to a folder on your computer, it creates this path that you can follow, and I could go to another location and travel around there through the path. That's something that I encourage you to explore on your own computer when you have more and more things available. If you want to create more folders, inside of someplace like your documents, you can right click on that and choose new folder, and then you can create a folder that way and call it whatever you like. Finally, let's go to the recycle bin. I'm going to double click there. And if I wanted to bring something back that I had deleted, I could right click on that June-July almanac and choose restore and bring that back. And now, in a moment or so, we will see June-July almanac appear here. Sometimes it takes a second to come back, but it's there. So that's working with the File Explorer. It's something that not everybody is familiar with because we use the shortcuts more often than not, or the Start menu. But if you have anything you're looking for on your computer, this is where you would go to find it. So if you downloaded something and you don't know where it's at, you would go to Downloads. If you saved a picture, you might want to try Pictures. If you have iTunes or another music program on your computer, you might want to check the music listings there. A lot of useful information here, something that you should definitely check out. Finally, let's talk a little bit about the logins and what you would use at the lock screen. If you have a new computer and you're getting used to Windows 10, it might ask you to create a username and password. Now when you do that, it will ask you if you have an existing Microsoft account. This is one of the new things that they have with Windows 10 that you might not be familiar with from Windows 7 or earlier versions. What they're trying to do is allow you to connect if you have an Office 365 account and information accessible through that. Most people will not have this. Even if you use Outlook or Hotmail for your online email, you probably don't work with Office 365 because that is something that you pay for on a subscription basis. If by chance you do have that available, you could use your Office 365 login as a way to better synchronize with all of your cloud resources. Those of you that use Office 365, I don't want to go too deeply into that in this class. It's a little bit more complicated than this class calls for. But if you are familiar with it, either from work or other situations, you might know that it gives you access to cloud storage, that means saving files online, as well as, depending on your license type, cloud resources like online versions of Microsoft Word, Excel, or other programs. So be aware of that and know that that's something that you can find and you can access with your username when you create this. For most people, myself included, you might be more comfortable with just creating a local username and password for your computer at home if you don't need to access anything over the internet. Something to check out and to think about when you are setting up a new computer. But if you've been given one that already had the login information available for you, that's perfectly fine. You might be familiar with the idea of creating multiple users. That is something that you can do. For most home users, it's not worth the hassle. It's easier to have one user and stick with that unless you needed to have dramatically different permissions. Say you have somebody young in your home and you want to restrict what they're able to access, but you still want them to be able to use the computer, you might create a second user in that situation. But for the most part, the user that you have is perfectly fine, and creating a local one will work best for most computer users. I hope this introduction to Microsoft 10 was helpful for you. If you want to learn more about it, we encourage you to check out some of the many books that we have available here at the library, or to take a look at some of the online tutorials available through our website. Feel free to come by the library and ask us any questions. We'll try to help you in the lab or guide you in the right direction. But check back at any time for any other classes or any other videos that we have available here. We're looking to help people in any way that we can during these difficult times. Thank you and have a great day.